Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Brad Hiscock from Covivial Games, a Canadian game publisher that has just launched their first game, Feuds and Favors. Feuds and Favors is a medieval-themed strategy card game and is currently on Kickstarter. Brad, welcome to the binge. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast to talk about your story and your game. Let's start off with Covivial Games. I hope I didn't butcher the name. What does that mean?
A little tiny bit. It's convivial.
Convivial. Okay.
Yeah. So convivial is a word that means to have fun with a group of friends, basically, or have fun around that kind of a thing. So I thought Convivial Games was a pretty good fit.
Oh, awesome. See, on this podcast, not just about playing games and learning about games, we get education sometimes even in the English language. So that's super cool. So now, what's your date? Like, I know you kind of came running at the last second to the podcast, probably came from work. What is it you do? What's your day job?
I'm an electrician by trade,
Oh, sweet.
and I'm a project manager there now with a local company. So we're actually building a bank downtown. So I was at a big site meeting for that because we're approaching the end deadline, and it ran a little late. So thank you for bearing with me there at that last minute
we made
entry.
it. We launched right on time, which is good. And you're East Coast Canada, right?
That's correct. As east as you can go.
Now, did you grow up in the East? Is like you've always been an East Coaster, or did you kind of move out there at some point?
Yeah, no, I was born and raised in Newfoundland, so pretty just outside of the capital city in CBS.
Yeah.
So St. John's is the capital city here, and we're right on the east coast of the East Coast. So we actually got a spot here called Signal Hill, and it's the most eastern point in North America.
And you're near Signal Hill?
Yeah, we can see it pretty much from the house.
Oh, nice. Now, I was gonna say, like your accent isn't super thick, so you can kind of get away with almost somebody not necessarily knowing you're from East Coast. I have some buddies live in Newfoundland, and and sometimes the accent can be very thick.
Oh yeah, we're pretty famous worldwide for having a very large amount of dialects on a very small population in Ireland.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much every 15 minutes you drive, it's almost a different sound.
Yeah, we kind of made fun of him. He moved here actually, so I'm in kind of the middle of Canada. I'm in just north of Toronto in Ontario, and he moved back. He moved here for a few years for work, so he was here I guess about 8 years, and lost most of his accent. Went back for like a month to visit family, and then came back, and we're like, dude, like, I need a translator. I have no idea what you're saying to me right now. So he just lays it on thick sometimes, and it's always a lot of
fun. Even a weekend trip can do that. And say sometimes you go somewhere with friends that are just from an hour outside of town or anything, and as soon as you get there in that setting, they like instantly switch like a light switch and talk in that accent or dialect. Sometimes it's slightly different words and things.
Yeah.
But it's super interesting. And what part there are you from? I got family up in Guelph.
Guelph. I went to school in Guelph, actually. I'm so just north of Toronto is a city called Barrie. For those worldwide listeners who know their Canadian geography, usually most people know where Toronto is, right? So it's in southern Ontario, and if you just drive straight north for about an hour, you'll find us. I always find it funny. People make fun of Canadians because they say they measure distance in time, right? So they say, how far do you live from this place to this place? They'll say, oh, it's about a 45-minute drive. Rarely will they say, here's how many kilometers or here's how many miles away it is, which is kind of funny.
I didn't even know there was a different way. Yeah,
until about earlier this year, I was reading something. I'm like, what? That's so true. I do that all the time. I didn't realize that was kind of a local thing. So it's too funny.
Well, maybe it's a full country thing. I've never heard somebody say, "Oh, it's 23 kilometers away."
Yeah.
No, it's always it's down the road 15 minutes, or you'll get the famous landmark. Yeah, it's like eight minutes past the gas station.
Yeah, exactly. So how long have you been gaming for? Like you're obviously into the electrical world, but gaming I'm sure is a hobby of yours. Like when did this all start? Is this something you've been doing your whole life, or?
Pretty much, yeah. I grew up with like it was me and my brother when I was growing up, but we were separated by several years, and I ended up, being alone a lot as a toddler because we were pretty far out from other people. We had a decent sized piece of land,
Yeah.
and going to the neighbor's house wasn't as easy as that.
Hmm.
So I spent a lot of time even in like toddler and preschool, and then early childhood years playing games or attempting to, of course. So it did start very young, and then I kind of graduated further and further into the hobby, and I just kept expanding. And the more I got, the more I wanted to dig deeper.
Yeah. And so I was reading somewhere that was like, was it 10 years ago is when you first started designing games? Is that, do I get that right?
That's
Or,
pretty close, yeah. So I was probably when I started writing them down. It was probably around 2006, 2007.
mm,
But this one in particular came about like the 2009, 2012 area. It's
yeah.
kind of a bit of a shady thing. I found it in some design notebooks and stuff that I had. So it's not exactly dated, but it's about that old. But the edition at the time was played with 2 packs of 52 playing cards.
Yeah.
So it's come leaps and bounds past that. It's can kind of be called an inspiration for the current game rather than a direct path.
Yeah. Now you're making games, over 10 years ago or so, or even maybe longer. Um, but you didn't take it to the next step of polishing. So what was it that kept you from moving to the next step or even mothballing some of these game designs you had and kind of going on with life?
Um, well, I'd still made a lot of physical prototypes and things,
Mm,
just as a hobby, something I really enjoyed. Almost like you do like modeling for like toll painting and stuff
yeah.
for minis and things. It's a self fulfilling thing, and I just really enjoyed that. So my local area and close friend group, we did play a lot of games that I had created. Um, but at some point, we kind of expanded that, and I took it to different events or parties, and just was really getting a lot of buzz about it, and decided to share it wider.
Yeah. Did you ever take it off? We call Newfoundland the Rock, right? So have you ever taken it off the Rock, or because travel is,
Not,
I mean, it's quite some distance, right? I don't think people realize how big Canada is. It is enormous
yeah,
geographically, and
second largest country. Yeah,
yeah, so
so
flying from like Newfoundland, which as you said is like, the first point out into the ocean, even to Ontario where I'm located, um, is quite a long flight and is not cheap, right? So travel has got to be
yeah,
tough too when you're on the East Coast. Is there any kind of local game shops or anything you could be part of as part of that or
there is. So there's it's not a massive community just because our population isn't that
sure.
high. The entire province, which like you said is very widespread, is about 500,000.
Yeah.
So from that, the gaming population would be significantly smaller, but we have a few like really big players in the game here. That would be like Midgard Gaming, Nobles Miniatures, and like Escape Quest and places like that are in and around this area that just really helped expand this. And we're getting a couple of like board game cafes and bars and things. Like
Yeah.
we got one called oh man, that's no good. I completely just dropped the ball here. I know exactly where it's to. Um, but anyway, they just encourage people to come in, and that whole aspect of coming in and playing a game is completely new here,
Mm,
and it's really taking. So that's kind of where I can take things now, where before it was almost like private meetups and different groups that were like related to say like the university or related to some different fields, and you kind of got
yeah.
like a side piece out of it. But when you can find a direct group of people that are only interested in what you're doing is quite beneficial.
Yeah. And I know it's like for instance you have tabletop simulator as well that you've programmed your
Yeah.
game out. Like are you able to do any kind of virtual playtesting with people in other parts of the world or
Well, that's where really we picked up a lot of the slack from
mm,
what we could offer ourselves here. Tabletop simulator and a lot of those groups like Break My Game or virtual playtesting, those groups have been fantastic for us, and we were able to do, instead of having what would have been maybe 50 to 100 play tests here, we were able to double and triple that online, and we got to a little over 300, I think, recently, and then we just kind of stopped and focused entirely on the Kickstarter itself.
Yeah.
So yeah, without the TTS mod, we would have been missing those extra eyes and things, and connecting with specific designers and stuff from like the Board Game Design Lab is a big one.
Yep.
Big group on Facebook and stuff.
Yeah,
and
great.
the hive mind there is just fantastic.
Yeah, it's a very welcoming community. I know we say this almost every single podcast, and people are probably sick of hearing it, but it really is such a welcoming community, and everyone is there to try to see you succeed, right, and see you create the best possible game you can create. So, and I'd be remiss to mention, so this particular game, we're doing an actual giveaway, a sponsored giveaway right now on our Instagram channel. If you go to Board Game Binge Podcast, so that's our Instagram handle, is Board Game Binge Podcast. This is going to run until probably mid tomorrow. So mid Friday is when we will do the draw. So if you're listening to this podcast on the replay, or if you're watching it live, I would encourage you to go to our Instagram channel, again, Board Game Binge Podcast, and to enter. It's very, very simple. All you have to do is make sure you're following us. Make sure you're following Brad's company, and I'm not going to butcher the name, so I'll let you say your handle, because I think there's like
Convivial Games NL.
NL. Oh, Newfoundland. Now I get it. There you go.
Yeah.
Convivial Games NL. You follow the both of us. You tag two friends who you'd want to go to battle with, and you get a ballot. It's that simple. If you want a bonus ballot, then simply just go and share it in your story. Tag us as well in that, so we can actually see that you shared it in your story. You get a bonus ballot. So the odds are very good when we run our giveaways, and you never know, if you're listening and you enter, you could be the proud owner of this game. So feuds and favors, where did this idea come up with? Just walk me through. Like, this goes back 10 years ago. You sketched it down in a book somewhere, you forgot about it, maybe it's stuck under like a couch somewhere. How did it come back, and how did you breathe life back into this beast?
So we found it when we were moving. We had bought a new home, and we're just packing everything up, and it was in the unpacking process that I was like, there's a lot of stuff here, or maybe I'll donate some of these things to charity and go through it. So I did a deeper dive down through what I had, and that's kind of how it got discovered in amongst the rubble. But sometimes things just happen like that. You sketch a great idea in like a journal or a notebook, or even on an old computer, and then you kind of shelf it, and then it's so shelved that you forgot completely. So you don't even know to go check. And I found a bunch of things in that same book. So there was two more ideas that I may completely follow through with as well, that from the same thing.
And why did you pick this one? Why was this the game that you said, this is the first one we're going to do?
So one is the medieval theme. For me, I've always been drawn to that, like Game of Thrones, King Arthur kind of vibe. Mm-hmm. Visually, it resonated with me the most. It also kind of was the one I felt was the furthest along in terms of where I would go with it and where I wanted it to become. Mm-hmm. It kind of reminded me of an inspiration of like the classic game of War with 52 card deck, mm-hmm. and Magic the Gathering. So it was like a meeting of those two games, and tried to take the best kind of out of them. Mm-hmm. That's kind of where I was, and I thought that a light based game and a card only game was a lot more one affordable but accessible and easier to ship, and I felt that it was an easier project for me to handle and deliver successfully than trying to take on some of the larger projects and euros that we had in mind.
Yeah, I mean, mitigating risk is always a good idea, right? And I've heard different camps on this. I talk to people sometimes that say, "Oh no, go for the gusto. Just take your best. Who cares if it's it's a lot of work. Take your best game and go out there with it." And I get that if you only have one game, right? If you have one idea. But often when I talk to game developers or game designers, they often have many games, at the very least game ideas in various states of development. But also usually you have like a couple kind of in the can that they could go with. And the natural inclination I think is to say, I want to go with the one that I know is going to deliver the most, right?
Yeah.
But I prefer to say go for the one that has the least risk, where you can learn the most from it. Because if you do that and you fail, that's okay. It didn't really cost a lot, right? And the learning isn't and it's the failures and whether you fund or not. Sometimes the failure is when you get into, after you funded, right? And trying to get the game out to your backers, and things happen like a global pandemic where there's a container shortage and
Yes.
shipments from China to your distributors increased by tenfold, right? And you've already collected
Yeah.
the money, so you didn't account for that. Things like that can bury some people. Um,
100% agree.
right now, what's going on, the events around the world, has caused some supply issues, right? So you've got the COVID, you now got the more recent events, and now you're seeing some supply constraints, right? And you're having some suppliers that are saying, hey, our costs have gone up. I have to increase my cost. I know that this is the original cost, but I can't do it for that now. Well, the challenge is you don't want to have to go back to your backers and say, hey, things have changed since we finished this. Can you guys, give us more money? Often you're not even getting ready to start your actual manufacturing until many months after your campaign's closed, right? So these are all challenges. One recent one that I just heard of, and I'm not sure if you heard this, that in China, there's another COVID strain, right? So now there's factories
I did
shutting
hear
down.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the absolute worst, but I think that is, unfortunately, is par for the course at this point, with all we've known and learned about it over the last few years. But it will lead to different shutdowns. But there are ways that you can mitigate those delays, and you can try to expedite that whole situation. And we were originally going to launch last year,
Oh,
actually,
wow.
in June, so we're almost a year past.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what we decided to do, was to go and get a physical manufacturer prototype instead of doing like a game crafter or thing like that.
Yep.
And in doing so, our manufacturer already has all of our files. They already have all of our requirements for what we want in sizes, card qualities, and all of that. So any changes or stretch goals or things that we get in the meantime are just slight additions that will take away from that process, instead of being a full 6 to 8 weeks to go back and forth. So it's things like that that we really punched on, and contacted all like fulfillment agents and pledge managers and things to try to iron all of that out, in hopes to do it as fast as possible, but as well as possible at the same time, because
Yeah.
you don't want to take it all the way to the end and then have a rush finish. Just a strong finish is kind of the goal.
I couldn't agree more. So let's talk about feuds and favors. I'm going to show some overlays so people are watching on the replay or even watching live. I think the visuals of this game are just really, really awesome. Can you kind of explain to us the gist of how this game works?
Sure. So the game basically is a race towards 7 trophies. It's a medieval tournament style combat. So it's, instead of being like a single night, single combat, or like a joust, it's the reenactment of almost like a mock army fighting. And the goal is to try to earn the title of the Paramount Legion. And if you do that, you would, as your entire group, be able to reap the rewards of the kingdom for a full year. So in that way, it's something that the player you're taking on and the role you're taking on, you feel like you got something to really strive for. That's why all of these people are going to participate in this little tiny tournament that you are controlling. And the real bread and butter of the game would be the nobility cards that you can call on by earning and exchanging favors. And they are single-use abilities that will do really unique things to the battle and try to give you leverage and advantages over your opponents. So we had a massive amount of positive feedback on those, and everybody really enjoys that interaction and the extra uh, dynamic onto a normal combat.
And then there was a and just very quickly. So is this plays up to how many players?
Up to four.
Up
So
to
it's a
four.
2 to 4.
Nice.
It does work really well as a two-player duel type game.
Yeah, I was gonna
Uh,
say.
but when you expand it into 3 and 4 players, there's no rule changes. But because you can play your nobility cards on other people's turn, you can kind of use that influence to affect other combats. So it's a lot of behind the scenes things, but it just works really well when it stacks together, and it's really fun to see how it plays out.
Oh, that's awesome. And then I noticed that there was I think it was near the end of your page, you talked about donating to an environmental cause. I think it's called
Rainforest Trust.
Trust. So
Yeah.
what is that? Explain that.
So Rainforest Trust is the world's leading conservation charity. Um, they have millions and millions of acres saved in critical land masses and rainforests. So they do that by purchasing land or working with indigenous groups in certain areas, and in that way they protect it from things like deforestation and endangered species and things. So personally, it's a charity that I've been a big part of for many years.
Oh
So
wow.
I felt that this was a natural thing for me to try to support. And originally, I had tried to before I kind of fine tuned the game, I tried to donate it to publishers to get them to give my share to Rainforest Trust at the very start.
Oh
But
wow.
yeah, so that's kind of where I went. I just wanted to do a little bit more. I mean, we're all becoming more and more aware of environmental impacts and things, and I just feel it's a very important cause.
That's the challenge, isn't it? Like you look at this industry where you have so many games now that are coming out on a weekly basis, and it's not slowing down. A lot of these games got plastic, right? A lot of them. You got minis, plastic. You got thermoform trays,
Yeah,
plastic. Even cards now. Some of these varnishes and so forth you put on these cards. On one hand, you get the durability, but on the other hand,
yeah,
not so recyclable, right? So you kind of have to
and you
do.
even got PVC cards now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly, right. Yeah, it's playing
yeah,
Canvas was a game I was just playing not too long ago, and it comes with I think
beautiful game though.
something like 200
It
some
is
odd like of those plastic cards, right?
translucent
Yeah,
cards.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Really cool game. But you look at that and you say, okay, it's not like it's like a single use plastic, right? Where you're gonna use it once and throw it out. It's something that is meant to last, but still, eventually it will end up in a landfill, right? And it's putting some thoughts around that. So it's cool to see developers do that. I think Connor McGowey recently for Earth, we're talking about that, and we've got a game called Earth. You want to make sure that there's a bit of an environmental hook on it too. So
yeah,
his trays are all made of wood, right, and things like that to try to help minimize the footprint. So that's
I
commendable.
like that.
Yeah, that you guys are doing that.
Yeah,
That's pretty cool. It's too bad there's not more, and I know I'm guilty of it myself, even with my games. It's a balance, right? And it's a challenge, right? But I think we can all put effort forward to do more. Some of
yeah,
that,
and a lot of companies too. They're like the manufacturers are coming on board and providing those even sustainably sourced things or
yeah,
recycled materials. So even if it is plastic or things like that, they make a bigger effort to use those materials. And I think at least giving it another cycle through before it ends up in a landfill
yeah,
is a positive use rather than a complete new material.
yeah,
So that's nice.
yeah. I was gonna say, even like I think one of probably the biggest impacts that could be made would be to produce local, right? If we can get like a Canadian
Yeah.
manufacturer that could actually make things at an affordable price in Canada, in the
Yeah.
States, where they're not shipping it away, but actually could, do, I know there's game crafters, smaller runs, but even like larger run manufacturers. The challenge is it's so cost prohibitive that, people want the environmental,
Yeah.
impact on the game, right? And that's a huge one, not having to actually ship everything all around the world. But at the same time, that often comes with a cost, right? And it's getting the consumers to actually accept that cost. And I think there's some education that's going to have to come there. But I'm still kind of hoping that
Yeah.
someone eventually will say, you know what, let's bring the manufacturing to North America and
I
start.
think it's coming.
I hope
I do.
so. There's a lot of games, right? A lot of there's a lot of publishers. Like there's certainly enough demand here. It's just whether they can get the costs in line, I think, is a challenge. But maybe we'll see that with the containers, right? I mean, that was a huge cost.
Yes.
And when you start looking at those shipping costs now and factoring that into the actual manufacturing costs, some of
Yeah.
the local costs might not be that much more when you kind of look at it holistically across the entire game, right?
Exactly. And I think that like one the idea of you make thousands of something or 500 or minimum run a lot of places is 1,500 copies,
Yeah.
and then you ship that across the entire world
Yeah.
to get it to a location, and then you usually ship it out again to individuals. So that whole thing, like there's got to be a way to make that a more cost efficient thing. And like you said, with the container rise, I think that they're kind of going away for themselves to being a cost effective thing. And now, with the massive inflation that this industry has seen in the last decade or so, I think it's going to take a few people, not so much longer, to realize there's an actual business here that's very viable, if they provide some uh, kind of decent pricing, because a
Yeah.
lot of the pricing is just way too much here. But just a little bit of decent pricing and have some other options for them to do, like you said, some environmental things or some custom stuff, like the wooden trays is awesome, or like a lot of people do like custom bags or metal
Yeah.
coins or like lots of things. So if you offer any kind of swag like that, and then make it accessible to people, I think that it's definitely a viable business plan.
Yeah, I totally agree. So what comes after this? Is there an expansion for this game, or are you looking at like launching something else, or what's where do you go with this kind of basket of knowledge after this campaign's done?
So we do have a mini expansion for this game. We call it mini because it's the main game is 250 cards,
Hmm.
and the expansion is 40 cards. So it comes with some additional card types and a couple of unique nobles that are not accessible otherwise. So we decided to include that in this same Kickstarter, between the base and the deluxe of the game. That's the main difference. But after that, we won't build on this game at all. We're actually hoping to push forward a different project that's pretty far along, and that's a family themed Euro.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if somebody wants to follow the journey, how do they do that?
So the easiest way to find us would be at Convivial Games NL. We use the same handle for Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok, or any of that. We're most active probably on Facebook and then Instagram. But the Kickstarter, like you had mentioned at the start, is live and ready to go. And we have a very interesting stretch goal thing for financial or for social goals.
Hmm.
So instead of having two different rows like some games have, we have what we're calling cheat codes. So if we reach a certain goal on social, it will jump over the financial goal. So, for example, the giveaway that we are currently running with you guys there actually brought us past our first stretch goal for 250 followers,
Oh, nice.
and so we met our first stretch goal just I believe it was today. So that will bring us two additional nobles to the game, and yeah, we're hoping to keep that going.
That's awesome. So once again, for anybody who wants to participate in that giveaway, go to our Instagram channel at Board Game Binge Podcast and simply, follow us. Make sure you're following Convivial Games NL. Did I get that right?
Nailed it.
Nailed it. Perfect. And then tag two friends who you want to go to battle with. You get an entry into that giveaway. And if you want a bonus entry, just simply share it in your stories, tag both of us, and we'll give you an extra ballot. Again, tomorrow, so Friday, sometime in the afternoon, we're going to do that draw live on Instagram. And we'll get a person, and they will win a pledge copy of this game. I believe it's a deluxe you actually even put forward too, which was
It is,
super
and
considerate and generous, quite frankly, of you. So thank you so much for that.
very welcome. I think
Brad,
they're going to love it.
Oh yeah, I want to wish you all the best with this Kickstarter and this campaign, and I can't wait to see what a fellow Canadian comes with next.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. I had a really good time here today.
No worries. You take care. Cheers.
Cheers.
This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.